You remember a cartoon called Fire Dogs? Yeah, I'm sure you do. Anyways, that's a cheater cartoon. So let me tell you what cheater cartoons are. Most of the old classic studios, like Warner Brothers and MGM, Disney, they would do a certain amount of, A cartoons, and then they would do some B cartoons that they could do fast, just so that they could meet the deadlines and stuff. But, like Chuck Jones would make Roadrunner cartoons and Pepe Le Pew, which were kind of cheater cartoons, so he could make his amazing cartoons like Feed the Kitty or the Dover Boys, sort of one-shot cartoons. Well, we were strapped for time, and we were getting to the end of our story schedule, and we were short a couple of cartoons. So I sat down and said, what? I'm just going to make them firemen or something, or I'll make them fire dogs. They'll be Dalmatians. So I wrote the cartoon in about an hour or something like that, and then we just put it through production. And I figured everyone would get mad at me, but people turned out to sort of like the cartoon. And partly because of the fire chief character. The fire chief character was loosely based on my old boss, Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi, if you don't already know, I mean, you should know because he's a very, very famous giant of a cartoonist. He basically pioneered adult cartoons in the 1970s with Fritz the Cat, Heavy Traffic, Coonskin, and he also did some of the first, modern fantasy cartoons. He did Lord of the Rings, he did Wizards. He was very popular and very influential in the 1970s. He basically owned the 1970s in movies, animated movies. Well, he retired early in the 80s and then decided to come back about the mid-80s, and he called me up and said, "Hey, Johnny, I'm going to start a TV studio. I'm going to do stuff for Saturday morning cartoons." And I'm thinking to myself, Ralph Bakshi and Saturday morning cartoons? Here's a guy who made X-rated cartoons. All right, Ralph, come on over. We'll do it. So he shows up in Hollywood. He's from New York. And he wakes me up at 7 o'clock in the morning. "Come on, Johnny, let's get to work." So he makes a deal right away with CBS, ABC, and NBC to develop something like 5 different cartoons series each. And then at the end of the summer, they would look at them and decide if they wanted to put any of them into production. So Ralph and I and Lynn Naylor and Tom Minton and Jim Reardon and some other people, Dave Spafford, we spent the summer developing original Saturday morning cartoon ideas to pitch. Now the problem is, back in the 80s, when we were doing this, there was no such thing as an original cartoon on Saturday morning. All the cartoons on Saturday morning TV were based on pre-existing properties. They called it marquee value, which meant you could do the New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, you could do the New Adventures of the Jetsons, you could do, you could do He-Man, you could do toy cartoons based on toys. But the way the networks thought was, if you had a character that no one's ever seen before, the kids wouldn't know who it was and they wouldn't watch it. Which is crazy to me, because obviously every character is invented at some point. Bugs Bunny, had a first cartoon or something. But that's the 80s. So Ralph and I develop all these shows. They all get rejected. So by the time he went to the 3rd network to get rejected, that was CBS, he's really mad. And this is this huge guy, right? He's 6'3", probably weighs 250 pounds or something. He's super strong. I've seen him pick up desks and throw them. He's a scary man, right? So he's in there screaming and pounding the desk. "You guys just you only give us this money so that the other studios couldn't buy the cartoons from us." He's having this big fit, and they're all terrified. All the executives are like, "Please, Ralph, calm down." So Judy Price, who's the main executive, she says to Ralph, "Listen, Ralph, calm down. Honestly, here's the situation. We can't buy characters that are brand new. But if you had a character that was a pre-existing character that had marquee value, we'd buy that from you, promise. We promise. We love you, Ralph." So Ralph goes, "Marquee value? Fucking marquee? You want marquee value? I'll give you marquee value. I got a classic character." And they're all scared, right? "Who is it, Ralph? Who's the classic character?" And he thinks for 5 seconds. He goes, "I own Mighty Mouse." So they go, "Okay, we'll buy it. Just calm down." So he races back to his studio and tells his partner, which wasn't me after all, he says, "Quick, John, find out who the fuck owns Mighty Mouse. I just sold it to CBS." So sure enough, they call around, they find out Viacom owns it, which also owns what you're looking at right now, this shirt. He gets the rights to Mighty Mouse on the weekend, It calls me up again and says, Johnny, I need a studio. They think I got a studio. So I call up 35 of my friends who are all working at all the other studios in Hollywood, Hanna-Barbera, Filmation, Disney, whatever. And they all hate their jobs, right? Because all cartoonists in the 80s hated their jobs. So they all quit. And the following Monday, we had a studio full of 35 people, just from scratch. Judy Price shows up at the end of the week. We wrote all the stories over the weekend. And Tom Minton, Jim Reardon, and I, and Eddie Fitzgerald, we all pitched the stories. Judy loved them, and we were off. We made The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse in 1987. Now this was a historic event for animation, because that was the first cartoon that had been done in about 30 years that was actually made by cartoonists. Because all the cartoons made in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were made by executives, and weird pseudoscience and focus tests and market testing and all this weird crap. But the cartoonists had no say in what they were doing. It wasn't like the old days, like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Tom and Jerry, where the cartoonists just made up everything and they didn't have to ask permission to do anything. Well, this was the closest that was in the 80s. Mighty Mouse was before The Simpsons, before Roger Rabbit, before Ren and Stimpy. This was the cartoon that really turned the tide and ushered in what they were calling in the 90s the renaissance of animation. And Ralph Bakshi is completely responsible for that, because he kept the network people off our backs. He had all these great techniques. We'd be showing the rushes on moviolas for the network executive. We'd come in and he'd watch them to make sure that there were no dirty jokes or anything like that in it. And anytime a dirty joke or something came up, Ralph would go, so how about that ball game the other day? And the guy would turn around and they'd start talking about baseball. Meanwhile, there's what's going on, the cartoon, all this stuff. And we got away with it all. It was amazing. And a lot of the things that we did in Ren and Stimpy, I experimented with on Mighty Mouse. The domestic squabbles that Ren and Stimpy always have. There was a cartoon in Mighty Mouse called The Ice Goose Cometh, written by Tom Minton and I. And they had a scene in there where Gandy Goose lives with Mighty Mouse. And it's very reminiscent of Ren and Stimpy. In fact, if you watch any of those old New Adventures of Mighty Mouse cartoons, you'll see Ren and Stimpy stuff. You'll see not only Ren and Stimpy, but Tiny Toons and Roger Rabbit and tons of things that came later. That was the cartoon that just kind of started it all. Anyways, Ralph Bakshi, I'll get back to him here. He's such an amazing character. He's more of a cartoon than the best cartoon characters ever. He's wackier than Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck or Ren or Stimpy. So I based this Fire Chief on him. And that cartoon, the original Fire Dogs, was really popular. I had tons of fan mail about it saying, make a sequel, make a sequel. So back in 91 or 2, I wrote a sequel called Fire Dogs 2. Pretty clever, huh? And this time I decided I was going to make Ralph, the real Ralph, be the Fire Chief. Instead of loosely being based on him, it would really be Ralph Bakshi. So when we finally made the cartoon about 3 years ago, I called Ralph up and said, hey Ralph, you know that Fire Dogs cartoon? And that was his favorite. He loved the Fire Chief. So I said, well, how'd you like to be the Fire Chief? Fucking right from there, Johnny, let's go. So Ralph came down, we recorded him, and he was great. So the new Fire Dogs is actually, now here's the weird part, we didn't write anything in the new Fire Dogs. It's a documentary. This is all culled from real life. These are experiences that I had with Ralph. So just Ren and Stimpy are me in the cartoon, and the Fire Chief is Ralph in his real life. These are absolutely factual. It's rotoscoped, this cartoon. So anyway, it's also very gross. So if you don't like poo jokes and stuff, you better not watch it. Maybe you should go and watch the dirty cartoon, watch Naked Beach Frenzy or something. But it's very rude, this cartoon. But again, I didn't make up any of it. And we had a lot of fun doing it. You're going to meet Jim Smith, hopefully. I'm going to try and get him over here. And he was one of the main guys on the New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, and he knew Ralph really well, and he drew all the greatest scenes in this next cartoon. Fire Dogs 2!
So tell us about Ralph Bakshi. You were fired by Ralph Bakshi, weren't you?
Yes, I was once, and fired on camera.
On camera?
Yeah, he actually said it in the cartoon, and he meant it. Surprise. But I love Ralph. I think he's great. He's one of my favorite people in the
Who's your
business.
favorite person to be fired by?
Yes, I have to say, I'm going to be fired. Better to be fired by Ralph.
Well, if you haven't been fired by Ralph, you aren't in the film, in the animation business.
Yeah, I know. There's a long line of people who had that distinction.
Well, you were actually fired twice in one day, weren't you?
No, that's just a myth.
That's
It's a funny myth,
But it's a great myth.
it's
Did
a
you
great
call
myth.
your wife and say, Mary,
But-
Mary, forget everything I said about Eric.
Well,
Send me back
anyway.
up here. Everything's forgiven. Just so he could yell at you some more and fire you again.
First of all, I can't believe this film was ever made because it goes beyond anything ever done in animation so far as actually relating it to a real person. I mean, the audience is going to think that this is a character we made up or something, that nobody's really like that. And of course, there is. I mean, Ralph is a force of nature.
Ralph is
And
bigger than life. If there's a Mount Rushmore of animation, Ralph's right out there in front.
Yeah, Steve brought it to my attention in an email that human faces, that evolution is producing a smaller face as time goes by on human beings, but Ralph evidently has an experience that...
It's
that
winning many
condenses-
generations below Ralph before that kicks in.
Ralph is a big bull moose of a guy. He's a wonderful cartoonist.
Which is great when you're working on a scene about Ralph and then the shadow falls over you. And the shadow falls over you and then the smell of cigarette comes over your shoulder and then a hand goes over your head and places itself on the drawing board. And when I say a hand, I've got pretty big hands, but this was a big hand with fingers that could crush beer cans. It just leans over you and then the voice comes from this side. Leans in.
fuck you doing?
He's like, well, the nice thing is it was almost always good stuff. He'd lean and go, oh. So the hair is now standing up on the back of your neck, and you're like, I'm dead. I'm dead. And he's like, that's fucking good. I like that. That's good. That's good. And then turn around and walk away.
See, that's the key to understanding Ralph. He's a huge bruiser of a guy, really street, I don't know, just a big guy. But yet he's actually an artist. He appreciates good stuff. And on Mighty Mouse, the Mighty Mouse that was done for TV, that I think started the whole animation revolution, he allowed that to happen. He could easily have stopped that. He fought for that. And I remember in the beginning of that project, he said to everybody there, he said, look, I've done some adult things in animation, and I don't want to be known for that. I want to make some money. I want to eventually retire, with a nice sum of money. Don't get me in trouble with these guys. We'll do something more drastic in the future, but Mighty Mouse, I want it to be real nice. Don't go out there, just follow the scripts. We're going to do everything the network wants and everything.
And you get a toe in the door.
And once John started to do the really creative stuff that was kind of edgy, which Ralph told us not to do, sort of, Ralph looked at it and he had to make the choice. Am I going to go with this and argue for it? Or am I going to think about my nest egg and my retirement and all this stuff? And Ralph...
Nest egg.
Yeah, he threw the nest egg out and he fought for it. But I think hoping, well, John, I'll do it, I'll fight for this, but please, next time, And John's, oh, sure, Ralph. And then he'd come up with something that was so brilliant that Ralph couldn't turn it down. See, this is just it. Ralph was an artist. He appreciated good art. He's capable of making good art himself. I love the man because of that. And I don't think the whole animation boom, the whole animation revolution that happened couldn't have happened if Ralph didn't have the integrity to put art in front of profit. I hate to say it in such a simple way, but it's true. He stood up for that, and thanks to that, a lot of other things happened in the future. He stood up for John. He fought for that. He just about risked his career for it, his TV career. I have a great Ralph story. I think we all do. Actually, all of us sitting here, and many behind the camera, there's many Ralph stories to tell. One Ralph story that I like in the past was everybody's scared of Ralph because he's this big bull moose and roams through the studio screaming and yelling and all this stuff. And so one day I hear him shout at the end of the corridor. He says, "Everybody stop!" Oh no, forgive me. I'm sorry. Wait, I started the wrong place. I'm talking to Ralph in his office, and we're talking about something related to the production, and I'm just playing with my keys. And his set of keys looked just like my set of keys. So at some point I put my own keys in my pocket and I saw his keys lying on the desk there. And, you know, thinking they were mine, because I really wasn't concentrating, I was just thinking about what we were talking about. I started playing with those keys. And then finally when I got up, I put his keys in my pocket too. So I go back to my desk, and about an hour later, all of a sudden from the end of the corridor, booming voice, you know, everybody stop what you're doing! Find my keys! I can't find my keys! And so, you know, and it's just booming. I mean, you know, when Ralph yells like that,
Where are my keys?
yes, lamps vibrate. Things fall off the wall, you know, posters and stuff. Tape won't stick, you know. So anyway, and he's booming, and he said, I have an appointment, I have to be somewhere in half an hour, and it's all the way across town. Where's my keys? I need my car keys. Everybody stop what you're doing, look everywhere, look in your office, look in anywhere you can think of, just look for my keys. And so, yeah, okay, you know, sure, I'll look for the keys. So I'm looking around, everybody's frantically looking under chairs and everything. And of course, since most of the artists are in one area, they're sort of tended to look there first, so one area got a lot of coverage. And so I go out, and I still don't know I have his keys in my pocket. So I'm looking around, you know, and don't see anything, and put my hand in my pocket just to think, and I feel 2 sets of keys. And meanwhile, Ralph is, kill the person who lost this.
Whoever took those keys is a dead
Where's my
man.
keys? Yeah, I'm feeling a second pair of keys in there. I'm like, oh, geez. Oh, no. I need this job. I want to have a living. I want to pay my rent. I want to eat. And so,
I want to breathe
so
another day.
I waited until the guys, you know, went away from this area where these chairs were in the lobby there, and I just went over, and when nobody was looking, I just threw the keys under the chair. I was like, oh, Ralph, you know, is this it? Is this the set of keys? And so,
So
he
not
comes
only
back.
did you steal his keys, you wanted to be the hero for rescuing
I
him.
didn't want to be.
I just didn't want to be killed.
Yeah, I didn't want to be a hero. So I just thought I'd give him the keys and that would be it. But instead, he looks at the chair, and he looks at the other animators standing around who would look under the same chair and didn't find anything.
You
He
in
looks-
confidence.
You fools!
It took Fitzgerald here to find my keys. You didn't find them.
You know? And then he said, come with me. And so he takes me around to every single office in the studio and introduces me to the person in there who I already knew
Who
anyway.
was too incompetent to find
But
his
who was
keys.
too incompetent when they looked under the same chair to find the keys. He said, look closely at a genius.
See these
This
eyes?
is Fitzgerald. He's brilliant. You do whatever he tells you to. Because he's the only man in the studio who knows what he's doing. Then he takes me to the next desk. You know, and the other person, you know, he's saying this to just sits there in fear and looking at me and, you know, smiling at me. And he takes me by the shoulders and takes me to the next cubicle all the way around the studio. For the next 2 weeks, I could do no wrong. Ralph was asking me how I was, you know, was my seat comfortable?
How was the wife and
Would I like a
kids?
Coke? He'd go get it for me, things like that. And I don't think he's ever heard
I was
this
gonna say-
story until he watches this thing that we're talking about
How long
right
do you think
now.
you'll live after this is put on DVD?
Not very long. Would you like to discuss Ralph filming on the set there?
Oh, gosh. We came up short and had to fill the better part of a half hour on first air. So Ralph basically pulled an old idea of Ralph Play Hole.
Ralph's play hole.
Ralph's Play Hole. And we put the whole thing together in about 3 days. And it was a grueling experience for everybody. I can't tell the stories.
There's a lot of good stories.
Well, I can tell one because at the time, John didn't know we were shooting live action, but nobody told me John didn't know we were shooting live action. They said he couldn't make the trip down to be John on the phone for the part that was,
Right.
because basically Ralph was saying he was going to fill in this live action thing. So I had to be John on the phone going,
Ralph, yeah, look, I'm late on the cartoon. I'm not gonna be able to get all this stuff done and fill it in, so you're gonna have to do something, all right?
and Ralph was on the set and they're filming him and I'm having to do John live for the video thing on the thing. And he kept going on and on talking on the phone. And at some point, it's like I knew this had to end, but I didn't know how to end it. And he kept saying, what? What are you talking about? And then going into this thing that he wanted to say. And finally, over my shoulder, somebody, might have been Steve, might not have been, said, hang up.
It was me.
And I went,
Okay, Ralph, yeah, well, you just gotta do it. All right, click.
and when I hung up that phone before Ralph had finished everything Ralph wanted to say, he turned and he just.
Oh, you don't hang up
this,
on Ralph.
This man Mountain who had things he wanted to say while he was talking on the phone goes,
And looked directly at me off camera. What? And I was like, oh, shit, he's gonna kill me when this is over.
but like a true professional,
He shook it off and moved on and hung up the damn phone and went on to the next thing.
He didn't call you behind the curtain.
he didn't
after?
call it. No, I fully expected to have the and so you could see his fist on the back of my shirt.
Well, the best thing was that the set was really small. It was the honeymooners set, and there was a curtain that came down in the beginning. So in between takes, they bring the curtain down, and you'd hear Ralph back there behind there with, you know, whoever Ralph was going to be bawling out that hour. Going, what the fuck you think you're doing? You're not a professional. I'm a professional.
And the cameraman, the director, everybody's just, you know, frozen stiff listening to this voice behind the curtain, you know, cursing and swearing.
Well, they get to be invited back there.
Oh, invited into the curtain.
Well,
Oh,
the rest,
that's
of
nasty.
the rest of the crew stands around going, waiting for their turn.
Well, John's theory was, he said, look, forget about the film. What you want to take, the film you want to get is Ralph doing it. You want the behind the scenes is where the real comedy is.
I think that's why they lowered the curtain.
Yes.
Yes. It wasn't comedy for some people.
Ralph did a great reading of that poem that he read. Ralph is actually a good poet at his best, and I heard him do a reading of that same thing in the office at Spunko, which would break your heart. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. But when he got in front of the camera, I think he got a little flustered, and he couldn't read it right. But somebody should ask him, you know, when they see him to do that.
Well, you know, he had another poem ready in case we needed more time. He wrote a sequel to Malcolm the Cockroach from Coonskin. And I have a copy of that. Ralph always had me transcribe all of his notes because his handwriting is completely illegible.
Even to him.
Even to him. So he'd look at it and what this is. Figure it out, Stevie. I'd go back to my desk, I go with a magnifying glass, and I think that's an A.
See, the amazing thing about Ralph, he's actually a sort of sensitive artist and a massive bull moose yelling body. You know,
Have you ever seen Ralph in the Black Mood?
What in the dark mood?
This Ralph.
Oh, yes, I have. That's very fierce.
Yeah.
That's
He
a-
would look at you
Which
when
we tried to
Charles
put in the
nervous.
cartoon.
She doesn't want to be around Ralph.
Yes. There were a
With
couple
Ralph,
of
you
those.
never know when he's going to blow up. I was
Yeah,
eating pizza once. I shouldn't say who it was, but somebody came into the room. Somebody Ralph was working with, and and a bunch of the animators and Ralph were sitting in the rec room of the studio we're working in. And so he says he comes with some pizzas and some Pepsi, and he says, "Hey, you guys, you know it's around lunchtime. I got some pizza for you. You know, I thought you might like it." He puts it down. You know, here, have some Pepsi. Gives us all some cans of Pepsi. Ralph's just sitting there with that look that Steve is doing. And I didn't catch it. You should always catch that. You should be aware when
You
it's
gotta be
on, because it
aware.
means something's going to happen. And I didn't know. So I open up the box and I think, oh boy, pizza. Because
Free food.
Pizza's the food of the god. There's no food better than pizza. So I take the pizza and I'm about to open it. I'm about to put it in my mouth. All of a sudden, Ralph just slams the table. I am utterly amazed the table didn't shatter into 1,000 pieces. I don't know whether it was made out of, you know, beams of oak or what. But it anyway, slams the thing. Bam! You know, the pizza just goes all into the air. Because he's right beside me. He leans a massive face into my face. What are you doing? Eating the pizza. You know? How dare you thank him for the pizza? Oh, that was it. I thanked the guy for the pizza. How dare you thank him for the pizza?
Thank you.
Do you know the disagreements I've had with this guy? And here you are thanking him for a lousy $10 pizza. Man, once again, the lamps in the room are like vibrating like this. John is the only guy I knew who could deal with that. John Before this, there were legendary stories about Ralph's yelling, and nobody knew how to cope with it. People would just sit there in utter fear listening to this thing, because it is a fearsome thing to watch. And John was the one who said, just sit there and listen. Don't say anything, and just stare. And that unnerves Ralph when he's yelling at you and threatening.
Actually, I did that on Cool World. There was a incident where Ralph was just furious about something, and he was like 3 inches from my face, going, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And spit coming in my face and the whole bit, and I'm just sitting there listening, and he finally goes like that because I'm not reacting, and he looks me right in the eye and he says, "What are you thinking?"
What are you thinking? Yeah.
And I said, "I'm thinking that my director needs something, and as soon as he's done telling me, I'm gonna go take care of it." And he goes, "Get the fuck out of here."
But you like Ralph, don't you?
Oh, I love Ralph.
I love Ralph
What's-
too. He's a
what's
wonderful
not to
guy.
like?
Ralph is the greatest human being on earth. You know, he feels so passionately that when he's angry, he's really angry, and when he loves, he really loves. So.
Yeah, the barrier's not there.
Hey, we're having a party at my place, and these are my pals, Eddie Fitzgerald. You heard that before, and this is Vincent Waller. So listen, we're going to talk about Onward and Upward, which is the next cartoon. And the way that came about was when we first started getting fan letters in 1990 for the premiere of Ren and Stimpy. The kids really went for the gross stuff, and we got a million letters where people said, "Hey man, you gotta like gross me out. Do a whole cartoon just for me where it's just completely disgusting." So I went to the most disgusting guy in the studio and said, "Vincent, what do you got for me?" So Vincent presented me with a story idea. What was it?
How about they live in a bum's mouth?
Well, they live in a bum's mouth. He comes up to me and he says, "How about there's a story where they live in a bum's mouth, and then Ren decides they want to move uptown and live high class in a spittoon." So their goal in the beginning of the cartoon is to figure out how are we going to get the dough together to move uptown. And anyways, from there on, once they're in a spittoon, they're living the high life, it's all gross jokes, just wall to wall, back to back. And a lot of you fans called and asked for this. So now, if you don't like this cartoon after you ask for a gross cartoon, don't come complaining to us, all right? We made it for you guys. So in the meantime, we put a lot of Three Stooges jokes in it. There's a lot of acting scenes where Stimpy is trying to pretend that he's upper crust and stuff like that, and he's driving Ren nuts because he has like really stupid, simpleton manners and stuff like that. Eddie has theories about that, which I'm sure he'll be glad to tell you. Oh, by the way, if you're homophobic, you might want to avoid this cartoon.
Just fast forward past it.
We also had a lot of letters from gay couples who would write to us and say, "Hey John, you know, I really love these cartoons because I can identify with the relationship. Ren and Stimpy would get into the worst fights and they're screaming at each other and stuff. And at the end of every cartoon, they're back in the sack together. So make more cartoons for us." Of course, they said it with a slightly different inflection. And I can't do that. So anyway, we put some gay gags in there along with the gross gags. Anyways, Vincent, do you remember any crap about this cartoon?
Well, the main thing I remember was a brand new layout crew, and everybody hadn't quite figured out yet that just because the storyboard drawing is a little bit different, that doesn't mean it's an entire new scene. So we had lots of little tiny camera angle changes at the very beginning that we had to go back through and combine into scenes to make them all the same, because we had plates and silverware that were going while Stimpy was being his hoity-toity and getting on his nerves.
And you probably have noticed that everything changes from scene to scene in a Ren and Stimpy cartoon. There's not much consistency, and that's because we have so many different artists, and we don't generally force everyone to draw in exactly the same style, although some artists may argue with that. Like Vincent has a completely different style than Eddie, who has a different style than me, who has a different style than Katie and Luke. Everybody draws different at Spum Troll. And we sort of encourage that, unless they're going to draw wimpy. And then I get really mad. But as long as you draw funny and it makes sense in the story, fine. So this cartoon is absolutely full of scenes where, like, from one scene to the next, Ren looks completely different. And there's some scenes in there that that Eddie acted out for me, where Ren has a little pencil mustache. You see, Eddie here is really debonair and suave.
Thank you.
So he was the model for Ren when they're having dinner in the spittoon. Make the Ren face.
That's the one. Complete with pinky.
Yes.
Eddie has theories about that too, and I'm gonna hand you over to these two guys so I can go get another beer.
So Eddie, what are your theories on Onward and Upward?
Well, I knew that John was interested in Three Stooges. He's been interested in it for years. And I knew that somehow he'd find a way of putting that in his cartoons. And I didn't think it would work. And I told him I didn't think it would work because I said to him, John, you know, the Three Stooges, they start with, a rich guy says, hey, I need somebody to paper my walls, you know. And I wish I knew someone who could do it.
Christ! Speak of the devil.
So, are we starting again or what?
No, keep going.
Oh, anyway. So I said it wouldn't work because those things, you know, the Three Stooges have a beginning. And they almost don't have an end. The end might just be them
Yeah, just
riding
ride
into
all
their
the bulls.
bulls. Yeah.
Which I
So
saw
really,
several times.
it's a beginning and a middle. And the middle is just a bunch of gags. So if they're hanging wallpaper, and it has to be done, but you know, by the time the party's ready or something, the whole middle section is one gag after another. And I said to him that I didn't think you could do that in animation, especially in a half-hour format, because it's there's no you won't be able to put music on it. Each gag will be separate. You know, how do you combine them? The Three Stooges had these sound effects. To tell you the truth, I don't really know how the Three Stooges did it. It seems like magic to me. But very few people could reproduce what they did, even in live action. And I just predicted doom. But then again, I predicted Ren and Stimpy's voice wouldn't work with each other. So I have a horrible record with predictions. But anyway, to my and I thought it would run out of momentum, because when you have just a bunch of gags which are not tied together by a story, by a really solid story, because they're really in a situation rather than a story, I thought, holy cow, it's going to run out of momentum. You know, it'll just run out of gas in the middle. It'll be a disaster. Although I thought if anybody could pull it off, it would be John. And boy, did he ever. And Kevin Coley told me something interesting, which I don't think John agrees with. And Kevin said, well, you know, that show came in a little bit short, and so we had to lengthen a few things. And some scenes benefited from that, and some scenes didn't. But you know, my favorite thing in that film is that in this extended middle, there's all these gags about, I don't know, like the cigarette and Stimpy or the spoon on his head, you know, little kind of micro gags. And I didn't think those, you know, I'm not used to seeing that, because they're throwaway gags. Everybody says, oh, everything in a film should move the story forward, and I hate that theory. I think if you have an interesting digression, go for it. And here, the spoon on the head is just not a digression exactly, but it's not moving the story. Well, arguably maybe. But anyway, there's all these micro gags in it. I thought, you know, whenever you see something like that in a studio, usually it ends up on the cutting room floor. The audience never sees it.
Right.
And here, in the whole middle, there's a ton of those kind of gags. So that I thought this film represented a real breakthrough. It just had a lot of little sight gags, which is really what comedy is about. I think the big high-profile situations in comedy are not as funny as the little things that happen along the way. And this is full of things like that. And last but not least, my final theory, if I'm not hogging too much here, is that a lot of the animation that's around now is about nice suburban people. And I like the idea that Onward and Upward is about people who are worried about survival. I mean, there's something at stake here, you know. And Ren, when he finally gets the money to move out of the bum's mouth,
And into a spittoon.
and yeah, in the classier place, which is a spittoon, he's delighted. I mean, he's just frenzied about it. And they really want to move up in the world. You know, Ren is really into status, and man, that's real life. To me, real life is like Ulysses, and the land of the Cyclops and the sirens and all this. That's what life is. It's not little suburban things, where you relate to the guy in the 7-Eleven or something. It's massive things that happen. Some girl that you think is beautiful, you can't get her. You can't get food, you can't get shelter. It's the big things in life that really motivate me, and I assume everybody else too. And a lot of modern animation doesn't have that. But John's cartoons have this gritty earthiness that I miss in other animation. I'm so glad it's here.
Is it the gritty earthiness of snot and boogers?
Yes, you could say that.
Like choking down a long globular booger?
Yes, I love that globular booger. People tell me, I say, well, why don't you like this film? The ones who don't like it, just, it's that globular booger. That's the thing. I just can't take that. What do you mean can't take it? It's one of the best things in the film. But you feel like smacking the audience sometimes. But
Enjoy boogers. Enjoy gayness. Do it now.
yes. And John did one of his finest drawings that I've ever seen him do of Ren with the cigarette holder in his hand.
Yes. A little collar.
For that, they're both sitting there enjoying the high life. So is Stimpy did.
What's Curly doing right now?
Curly?
I've been wondering, you spent this whole interview in your lap.
Chit chat time with John K. Hey, I started in cartoons, if you can believe it, back in the 1980s, which was kind of the dark ages of cartoons. That's when cartoons were really crummy. I don't know, I'm not sure if I can say these things, but Smurfs, Strawberry Shortcake, Laverne and Shirley in the Army. I worked on all this crap, and it was awful, let me tell you. And everyone I knew, all the cartoonists, we were young back then in our 20s, we all hated it. We all wanted to kill ourselves. And kids, if you're watching this, don't kill yourself. Unless you work on some crummy cartoons. So anyways, they were really boring, and the cartoonists really didn't have any creativity. We didn't have any say in what we were doing. We just had to draw these evil scripts that retarded scriptwriters would write for us. And literally, they were retarded. I mean, they couldn't spell, they couldn't construct a sentence. It was embarrassing. We had one guy, Tom Minton, used to take the scripts. We were working at Filmation. He'd light them on fire and throw them into our into our office. We'd have to get up and stomp the thing out. Man, generally, even today, to this day, even after Ren and Stimpy and all the things we changed, cartoonists hate scripts. Believe me, and most of them can't get through a script in one sitting. What usually happens is you either fall asleep or you get really mad and you light it on fire or something. So, and I knew some writers too back in the 80s, and they had all these weird theories. One of their theories was that there were only 7 stories. Honest, they really said that, and I heard a lot of them say that. And if you watch 80s cartoons, you will see those same 7 stories over and over again. In every cartoon, all they would do is change which characters are in what situation. So they would have the evil twin story. Or they have like let's share everything story. I don't know. I can't remember them, but there weren't very many of them, and it was the same script over and over and over again. We just went crazy. So I swore if I ever got to make my own cartoons, I would find some new stories. And I was influenced by a lot of different things, by old cartoons, Bugs Bunny, Betty Boop, Popeye, all the really cool cartoons. But not only cartoons, but old movies, and even real life. Like, when I heard this there are only 7 plots theory, I thought about, gee, more than 7 things have happened in my life, and I'm only 25 or something. So I decided I would, write some stories about things that really happened in my life, things that were ideas from old books I read or old movies. And in the process, we introduced all kinds of new story types in the original Ren and Stimpy's, one of which was the psychodrama. And I didn't coin this phrase. It was coined, as far as I know, by Mike Lazo of the Cartoon Network. And when I did a Yogi Bear cartoon for him called Boo Boo Runs Wild, which he said, "Oh, John, it's one of your psychodramas." And I agreed with him. I said, that's a pretty good term for it. And some of the Ren and Stimpy psychodramas, of course, revolve around Ren. Stimpy's invention is a psychodrama, so is Space Madness, and there are interludes of psychodrama in almost all of the cartoons. So some of you out there wrote me letters saying, hey, give me more of that insane stuff with Ren. You know, give me a whole cartoon just about why he's insane. So I thought that's a good idea. Maybe I'll write one about his childhood. I'll have a cartoon where maybe it opens with he just did something hideous to Stimpy, so hideous that we can't even show it, that I won't even show it in a cartoon. So it's just the aftermath. So we see Ren, like he's all pitiful and everything, and he's in remorse, and Stimpy's screaming at him. And you know, you got to know that if Stimpy is mad, Ren must have done something really evil, because Stimpy puts up with anything. So then Ren feels so guilty, he decides that he needs help. So he goes downtown and he seeks help from the only person that could possibly give it to him. And I'm not going to give away the surprise, but we wrote this cartoon in 1991, and it was deemed too intense for kids back then. So if you have kids, you might want to wait, you know, till they're 36 or something before they watch this cartoon. It's Ren Seeks Help. It's a film noir cartoon. It has a very dark side to it. And, by the way, Ren does some horrible things when he's a little kid that I don't recommend that anybody does. If you are a kid and you watch this, you better not do what Ren does. This is a cartoon about a bad person. And if you do what Ren does in this cartoon, you're going to hell. But otherwise, just have fun. Just laugh at it, because it's just a cartoon. It's not really happening, but it is evil.
Go. That's my countdown.
Let's go. Ren seeks help. That's my favorite episode.
Oh, yeah.
That is
absolutely.
my favorite episode. I just saw it today. First time.
Oh, is that true?
First time today.
Holy
Yep.
cow.
Eric here, his voice crying out loud from the get-go.
Well, thanks. I actually am very fond of that only because Stimpy's in it for a limited amount of time, so you don't really get to hear how bad I do the voice.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's inspired, actually, that film. It never says exactly what it was that Ren did to Stimpy.
Yeah, yeah.
You can only imagine when he whispers to Mr. Horse what it is, Dr. Mr. Horse, what it is he actually did.
Yeah, a lot of fans actually think that, you know, if you play whatever Ren says backwards, you find out what it is he does to Stimpy, but not true. I think that whatever ramblings he does is just pure insanity coming from John. I don't know. Crazy voice actor.
Just imagining what it was he did is truly inspiring.
Oh my god.
Well, the film is a tour de force of acting and drawing.
Yeah.
The scenes in the psychiatrist's office, the subtle expressions on Ren, the thing where he's walking along with the kid earlier in the film with a cigarette, they're both walking along.
Skippy.
The mother and dad looking out the window.
Oh man.
In the psychiatrist's office when the horse can't take it anymore and he gets mad and he wants to kill Ren. This is feature quality animation.
Yeah, definitely. Kudos to, I guess Carbuncle did most of that, no?
Yeah.
From what I understand, they did like a lot of great animation, and they're masters of taking, you know, stuff made for TV and making it look like feature. You know, thinking of Son of Stimpy or Stimpy's First Fart. Like,
I was shocked when I saw that, because television is supposed to be the medium where you kind of schlock things out because you don't have time to do it right and everything.
Right.
Here it is, you're seeing something that's better than anything that's in any of the features that are in the theaters. It's just acting, like comedic acting on a level that television, I don't believe has ever seen before. Even in the, I was going to say even in the golden age of television.
No, you're right. The art direction is very 40s, and it looked like it comes straight out of the 40s. It's like 65 years ago. Suddenly here, it's a modern film with that flavor,
Yes.
that warmth.
And it's as if McKimson or somebody
Yeah.
worked on it,
Yeah.
you know, the expertise.
Yeah.
McKimson had this thing where, I was talking to John about it the other day, you know, Elmer has a scene where Bugs is in his arms, and, you know, Elmer goes like this while he's talking to Bugs, and, you know, moves his body and his face around, and McKimson didn't find that hard to do, but everybody else finds it very difficult.
Yeah.
They try to avoid things like
It's
that.
very subtle, but it's very...
John, all the way through here, is doing the really hard stuff, the really subtle stuff, the thing that's easy to goof up, especially when it goes through a system. And John somehow figured out a system. I think the system was to throw fear into everybody, to alternately praise them to the skies and to you know, not yell at them exactly, but you know, it's amazing that you're so intimidated by John, by the quality of the drawings and everything, that itself is it is so intimidating that it's almost as if the drawings yelled at you, you better not ruin us.
Yeah.
When you do this, when you, you better not, But I just could not believe the quality of the layouts and animation and conceptual things in it.
A lot of that, the layouts were done by Helder, and he did a lot of the thrashing of Mr. Horse at the end with the big scrap between Ren and Mr. Horse.
When he gets killed.
Ultimately, when he gets killed, some of the more back and forth talk between Ren and Mr. Horse were done by Steve Stefanelli. He did a lot of the boards and stuff like that. But,
Good work, good work.
yeah, I thought there was a really good mix up there. That was probably one of the episodes that really hit it on the head.
But it must have killed people to do it. I mean,
Yeah, because John likes to give everyone opportunities to do different things. So like some of the people that did do the boards had a chance to do layouts and stuff. A lot of the same Ottawa crew did work on Ripping Friends while they were, first employed by John about 1999. So drawing on that show really prepared them, I thought, to draw on Ren and Stimpy.
well, all the films, I thought that was the best executed.
Yeah, I think it's like a fan favorite though. They really thought that was super intense, and it really hit home when Ren just went ballistic at the end.
Man. I'm still shocked by that, though. I mean, it's better than feature quality. I mean, how many features have things like that in them, I mean, a scene like that, if it had existed in Pinocchio, would have been famous,
Yeah.
And the animator who did it would be famous. It would be discussed in all the books and histories of Disney and everything. And here we are working on a TV product that had scenes of that quality. And I don't understand how John is able to do such technically perfect scenes and yet get the humor in it where you're laughing out loud.
Yeah.
This is John's thing. He's always after the out loud laugh, not the inner, like that.
Yeah.
It's he always wants to see the laugh, and man, you keep thinking, well, okay, he did that in that cartoon, but he can't do it again, and then he does it again, and it's just so funny and so well done that it. To tell you the truth, I can't believe that exists in our time, because this is sort of a time of decadence in a way that there's some very good things going on, but maybe some not so good things, and music is in difficulty, and the novel is in difficulty, newspapers are in bad straits and so on. And yet here comes somebody, I hate to say this while John's here, I hope he's not listening. It's kind of embarrassing. But I can't believe we got somebody of that caliber in this generation, in this time. In the 40s I could see it, as somebody in the Clampett era maybe, at Warner's, but I don't understand how it happened, and John didn't have the advantage that Clampett had. Clampett had a unit of people that he worked with for years. He had a studio that backed him up and supported him. The crew liked him. Imagine that, the crew liked him, the director. Just a lot of advantages that John doesn't have. John has to make a new crew on every project with
It's
just
tough.
a couple of holdovers.
It's almost like every crew after the original Ren and Stimpy crew was, the original crew was more of his peers, I thought, and every crew after seems to be more of a student-teacher situation. So he ends up taking a lot of time training the artists, and they're more than willing to learn.
Yeah, and then
That's
they
a
go
great
out and
thing.
spread those ideas. And
That's the crazy thing.
consequently,
You
John
look
has
at-
been sort of the teacher of the industry
Yeah.
and has had a huge effect on the style of animation that's being done now. Almost every studio that's doing comedy, 9 out of 10 of them or 8 out of 10 of them are doing something where you can see the influence of John, whether it's direct or indirect.
That's true.
It just, the guy changed the whole era that he's in without some of the benefits that Clampett had, or the advantages that Clampett had. So I'm just shocked to see things of that quality on television. To tell you the truth, I still don't understand. I think I just dreamt it. Couldn't possibly have happened. Man. And the innovations on the show, getting the beats on the music to match the animation, which has the same beats and so on, even though he's using canned music.
Yeah, it's another device that he had invented, and Steve Worth also did some of the animatics on a lot of these great cartoons, and it's definitely worth talking about.
Eddie? Eddie?
Yeah, the camera still can't see Steve. Oh, yes, it can.
Okay. I have a confession to make.
When I was in Cub Scouts, we went out late at night one night and caught frogs. And there was a kid who had a mini bike. And the kid who had the mini bike, we threw the frogs under the tires, and the mini bike spun its tires in the mud and spat pieces of frog out.
Oh, well, that's not, you shouldn't be proud of that.
I mentioned that to John once at breakfast, and it ended up in the cartoon.
Oh, Steve! Well, there you go, history being made. Man, oh man. See, that's the thing in that film I thought was a little bit gross, was the thing up against the wall with the bike.
I lived it.
Oh, no. But man, there are so many good things in this film. If somebody was to say to me, well, gee, that thing about the animal, that's too much. I didn't like that, therefore I don't like the whole cartoon. All I could say is, well, then I guess you don't like Toulouse-Lautrec, because he painted a class of people you don't like. I mean, look at the execution of the thing. It's just absolutely amazing. This is a phenomenal masterpiece, just a work of art. And it's amazing that on this project, after he's done so many things in the past, that he was still innovating, one thing after another that was new and not done before. Constantly in the new things in the way the sound is done, the way the drawings are done, a new way of even drawing the characters in some cases. I just can't believe the number of innovations on a show like that. You could pick it scene by scene, and man, I just don't believe I worked on something like that. It was just a dream.
How did you feel about the sequence where Ren's parents start making out? Pastor Hoek.
That was hilarious. That was so funny. Man, oh man, I couldn't stop laughing the first time I saw the board for that.
Some really good close-up scenes of the dogs' mouths coming together. I think done by Jim. Jim Smith did a lot of those, and I just thought the voice acting by Michael Chris Felucci, that's John's dad. He did a lot of voices, a lot of side character voices in the series, and I thought he deserved an honorable mention because he's just the greatest. He'd do the reads to these characters before John would show up to voice direct them, and a lot of the times we'd hear his rehearsals, and whatever he came out with, you have to finish him off, that kind of thing was all him, And,
Do the Mangle the Frog line.
oh, I almost forget which.
Did you mangle that frog?
We gotta get John in here to do to reenact. You gotta get John in here to reenact some of that stuff for you.
It was John's dad.
Yeah.
For real, I did not know that.
I think John's dad was the formative influence on his life. I mean, he's still working out this thing that happened in his childhood.
Well, that whole living room sequence apparently is a page right out of John's upbringing. I forget exactly what happens, but again, we'll have to get John in to clarify. But it was a whole, the whole lecture thing with totally browbeating him. But it's just the funniest thing. You take the funniest things from life and show them to the world in cartoon form.
And is not Mr. Horse one of the all-time great characters? The way he is in the psychiatrist office is a perfect foil for Ren.
Yeah,
And
totally.
Ren's sitting there, and he's not realizing how he's grossing the horse out. The horse is trying to keep his cool,
Like when
be
he grabs your
professional.
gun. for a test.
Oh, that gun scene! Oh, that was shocking. I couldn't believe how good that was. Man, oh man. Wow.
It always gets a rise out of the audience. So it's always
Who's
fun to
that
show.
guy that gives him the carrot?
See, John was just talking about that tonight. Did you know that story? Apparently, it was in a book on training horses. There was a gentleman that would give carrots to horses.
It's a real horse trainer.
The real horse trainer.
It's a very good design.
You like the way Red looked when he was smoking?
Yeah.
Smoking looks so great in animation, the way you do this with your fingers and put it up to your mouth. Burst your lip.
Your voice work in the beginning
Was brilliant.
is brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. Man, oh man, every time a new cassette came in with your voice and you weren't there, we all just stood around, listening and laughing, and everybody was saying, we can't believe how good this
It's
is.
true. We said that before we started, it's true. It's
I really,
inspiring.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I really do. It was
And I
really-
can't believe how many other things you did on this film. You were like a man of a million hats on everything that.
Yeah, just working with the crew and animatics was really fun. Trying to figure that out, and yeah, I don't know. I just had a great time overall. I learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot working with everyone. So.
Man, one man studio.
Mel Blanc Jr.
We'll see about that. I don't know. Maybe one of Mel Blanc's toenail clippings, perhaps. I don't know about Junior, but hopefully there will be more if the DVDs do well, and it'll inspire the networks to produce more.
What I want to see, and the whole reason I'm in animation in the first place is because I love to see cartoon acting. And when it's funny, to me, honestly, that's the best there is. I feel sorry for people in live action. I worked on a live action film once, and I swear the whole time I was there, I felt sorry for people, even though there were big names and everything, and there was lots of money and lots of excitement on set and everything. I kept thinking, oh, poor people, you know, we could have done this funnier, you know, and stuff like that. It's in acting, of course, acting requires a lot of subtlety in the drawing and the timing and the, you know, the animation and everything. And, you know, a lot of people just believe that a character should just come in off screen with really little walk and then, you know, just lean forward and just do this kind of expressions and everything. That's not acting. Acting is when it's really unique to the scene, especially if the writing is good and there's, you know, room for nuance in there. Man, and because John is involved in the writing and, of course, you know, directing the whole thing in an overall broad sense of direction, he makes sure that the acting opportunities are there. Because, you know, a lot of scripts for some projects in the past that I've seen, there's no opportunity for acting. There's not a heck of a lot. You know, if you have a line like, oh, I guess I zigged when I should have zagged, come on, you can't act that. That's like reading the calendar. That's like reading a math table or something. You have to write it into the script if you use a script. John doesn't really use a script, really, but just sort of an outline. But you have to write the story such that there's opportunities for acting, and then you have to have the people who can pull it off. And boy, I got to give it to John. You know, even though he'd come in sometime as the tiebreaker, you know, and do it himself, you know, sort of in a rough way, he'd give people a chance to do it, you know, their way first, or in some way, and you know, and man, that was just the best. I look forward every day to coming to the studio, because I knew that something that would happen that day would blow my mind. But it's just mind-blowing every day.
It's pretty fresh, always. Like, I mean, including with the voice direction and stuff like that. Like, you know, we'd come up with the most strangest reads during Ren Seeks Help, you know, at least for the Stimpy part at the beginning, where he'd have a deep voice and have really funny whimpering. I'm gonna kill you! All that stuff. We had the funnest time, you know, it was an absolute blast working on it.
Did he make you yell a lot?
Actually, yeah, it's funny because I don't know how many lines I had in that cartoon, but probably not many, probably like maybe 10 at most, maybe, and a lot of crying. And it took about like a good, like, you know, I always read about, you know, how he really grind into the ground to get the performance out of you, and I got to live it, and I couldn't talk for about a week or two after. I was like coughing up blood. It was pretty intense, but
People hand you a glass of water saying you're going to need this.
Yeah, totally.
Man, you feel like steel wool. I mean, I only did a minuscule amount on that and some other
Well, you
projects,
did
but
Cigarettes the Cat.
yeah, that was
That's
a
my
small
favorite
thing.
voice of
Well,
all
not
time.
like
That and Bugs Pussy. Two of the
Yeah,
best
well,
cartoon
definitely.
duos of all time.
So I felt like there was a scrubbing pad or steel wool in my throat. Or I had just eaten a lot of cotton, you know, washed down with a little bit of sand and salt. You know? You just want to take the whole Sparklets jug and put it up to your mouth.
It was pretty crazy.
It just goes on and on. You're shouting everything, and yet, but he wants nuance within the shout. You can't just shout. It has to be elegant, and lots of ins and outs, and you know, shades of character within the shout. Man,
It's pretty amazing because as much as John is, you know, spontaneous in some of his voice directing, he's also really, sometimes if I can't just deliver the line, he'll know exactly what he wants, and 9 times out of 10, you'd hear him coming out of the voice records after directing. His voice was really coarse, because he'd be yelling at the top of his lungs through the headset, and I'd be like, "You mother!"